In addition to decentering men, Jane Fonda also is a great example of self-compassion as key to healing. So this is part 2 of how working on yourself is a lifelong journey. It never ends. And that's actually what's cool about it, is you are constantly getting to know yourself and unlearning things and having to forgive yourself for all the things you didn't know before or the things that you were taught. And one of the things that she talks a lot about in her documentary, Jane Fonda in 5 Acts, is about how so many women's body issues are tied to trauma, particularly schmegdual trauma, especially childhood schmegdual trauma and abuse. And also, like, some of it absolutely comes from mothers, but a lot of it comes from dad. Another thing that she talks about, which I've never heard anyone else talk about, is how a lot of plastic surgery comes from schmegdual trauma. Not always, but, she's speaking from experience here. And so she talks a lot about how a lot of women are constantly altering their bodies. I mean, first of all, under patriarchy, because of the male gaze and the Western, like white supremacy culture around like body image and all of that crap, like this impossible beauty standard, Western beauty standard is not healthy for anybody. And so it definitely is coming collectively, like as a cultural thing. But it's amplified if you have a parent who is like kind of pushing that message onto you. And then if on top of that, if you also have a long history or even a short history with childhood SA where your body was taken from you and you got that messaging early on that your body is not yours and it is for the consumption or for the use or for the exploitation or for the enjoyment of everyone else, then yeah, you're more likely to fall into, eating disorders. I hate that I can't even say the word. And then also altering your body. And I love how she talks about this. Now, I've never had cosmetic surgery. One, I probably because I could never afford it. But I think I was really blessed. Not falling into the outdoor adventure world, but intentionally going into that world. And in that world, I didn't have mirrors. And I mean, a lot of y'all know I lived in my truck for 5 years following the outdoor adventure work, which doesn't pay well and leaves you constantly on the road in kind of a nomadic state. And so you don't have access to anything that you could use to groom yourself. Like in high school, I was like, straightening my hair and putting on makeup. And when you live in the outdoors, you don't have time for that. There's no need for it. You don't have mirrors. You have nothing to compare yourself to. And I really appreciate that. I think one of the reasons why I did not fall into the obsessed with how I look trap, especially given that I was set up for that. And I was absolutely bulimic that whole time. Like I was so bulimic and almost, that's another video, but for almost a couple decades, y'all, like life-threatening level. So I did not escape this ridiculous Western beauty image in general, but I did escape the additional pressure to, my clothes, my hair, my nails, my makeup, all that stuff is so expensive. It's so time consuming. And then on top of that, like plastic surgery. A lot of women are getting plastic surgery earlier and earlier, implants, altering their face, their lip, and all of that stuff is absolutely, I'm not saying it's not an empowering choice. I'm not saying that I'm not against it at all. I'm just saying that what she's talking about is that a lot of times, not always, women end up putting a lot of additional pressure on themselves to make themselves pretty and agreeable and beautiful. One, because it does affect your job and all of that stuff. Like I've talked about that in another video. A lot of women have to spend this money and time and energy in order to advance their career. I was lucky enough that that wasn't important in my career. So I just want to acknowledge that. But that a lot of times, even when we don't have to, the internal pressure to do that, especially if you were taught from a young age, especially if it happened from someone in your family or someone that, an adult that you love, that your body is for other people's pleasure. Of course, it makes sense that you will alter your body constantly in order to meet the needs or what you believe are the needs of everyone else, even to your own detriment. I just want to be really careful not to judge women who do this. And Jane absolutely is, I believe, is not trying to judge women. She's using her own story to try to shed light on one of the reasons why some women become addicted to it. And then she talks about how just so many girls at a young age are abused all over the world. And that abuse has a ripple effect that it affects them for the rest of their lives unless they get some serious help a lot of times. Because we don't feel comfortable in our own skin because, again, a lot of us feel like we were poisoned almost. And actually, I saw this today, and I totally forgot about this quote, but I love this quote. This right here: before you pass judgment on someone who's self-destructive, it's important to remember that they usually aren't trying to destroy themselves. They're trying to destroy something inside that doesn't belong. That is one of the that hit me in the gut, because especially, again, if you think about schmegsual abuse, especially for a child, this idea that you're damaged, there's something wrong with you, you're bad, there's something in you that made them do that. Maybe they put something there, all those things. Like, that messaging is so deep. It's almost in your bones if that happens as a child, especially repeatedly. I don't really think we talk about how common childhood SA is, especially within the family. But that's another video. So just for anyone who doesn't know, besides losing her mother to schmooicide when she was young, like a child, and then growing up in Hollywood, one of the most predatory industries in the US, she also, was SA'd as a child, raped, bosses tried to SA her, anyway, she has a lot of history with trauma. And she says she regrets having facelifts and her decision for implants. And it wasn't, in my last video, I said that I got the age totally wrong. I didn't realize that she was only 62 when she left him. I was like, yeah, 80, whatever. Sorry about that. It wasn't really until 62 when she finally started her decenter men work. She started to really be in her body. Because again, men, especially men who make you center them, you lose touch with yourself. So it's really hard to do this work when you're with a man who forces you to be cut off from your true self. I love how she says, at 80, I've closed up the shop down there. She is not messing with men anymore at all. She is done. But I like this quote where she says when she sees a woman who's had a lot of work done, she can't help but ask, are there dark secrets that person is hiding? And, because anybody who's a survivor of childhood SA is living with a lot of secrets. And a lot of times, what she's saying for her, the facelifts and all altering her face basically became a mask that she wore. Sorry, I covered her face. And I also relate to. She learned early on that being cut off from her body also meant it was really hard for her to cry. And her brother was crying when her mom died by schmooicide, but she couldn't. And she was like, what's wrong with me? She got praised for being so strong and never crying. And so she just reinforced her own silence and cutting herself off from her body. And crying, honestly, I didn't really learn how to cry until my mid-30s. I'm not saying I never cried, but I almost never cried. And I definitely never cried in front of other people. And a big part of my own healing and being in my own skin and healing all of that schmegsual trauma from childhood is crying, because you're so in your body when you're crying. When she talks about her ED, said mothers are often blamed for that. For me, it was my dad. Made me ashamed, thought I was fat, I didn't look the way he wanted me to look, I knew that he didn't want me around, that I embarrassed him. Apparently he told people that. She would hear her dad say things about her body. Now, I absolutely experienced that from my own dad. And then his mother, my grandma, also did that to me and my sister. So I get where he got that from. This policing of bodies, this shaming of bodies. He absolutely talked about my weight a lot. A lot of my people pleasing and centering of men was wrapped up in my body image. Jane talks about how that twisted her life in such deep ways and how it affected all the women that man was married to, her dad. But this is one of my favorite parts of the documentary. She says, I hate the fact that I have the need to alter myself physically, to feel that I'm okay. I wish I wasn't. And she talks about how she loves older faces. I wish I was braver, but I am what I am. I love that she admits that, because I wish I didn't care. I love that I care less, but I so wish I didn't care. but not judging myself for caring is also key. She says, I didn't know who I was, and it's taken a while to find her narrative.